Edible Plants Part 3. Those are the ending times. The edible parts of thistles are the leaves, roots, stems, seeds, and flowers. Very young plants are also edible. Boiling makes the spines edible. The roots are high in inulin and can be dried for later use. Long cooking makes them sweet. Seeds are good roasted. The roots of first-year plants are edible raw or cooked. Spring beauties are a member of the purslane family. The genus includes miner's lettuce, which is a very good green eaten raw or cooked. It also includes plants that were very prized by Native Americans because they're very rich sources of food, very good tasting. Spring beauties are edible raw, and there are quite a lot of calories from them even raw. The roots are said to be radish-like in flavor when raw and more like a chestnut when cooked. Young shoots, leaves, and flowers of bee plants are cooked and used as pot herbs. Bee plants are related to mustards. They are also known as stinkweeds because of the rather unpleasant odor they emit. Seeds can be eaten raw or cooked. They can be dried or ground into a meal. A black dye is obtained by boiling down the entire plant. It was used in decorating pottery. The fruits and seeds of bastard toadflax are edible. The fruits have a sweet flavor. They're better before they become too ripe. The fruits are very small. They're only about 1/4 inch to 1/3 of an inch, and they contain one edible seed. The plant is a semi-parasite on the roots of certain plants. It's also the host for a rust fungus that affects pine trees. It allows the fungus to reproduce. Hazelnuts are a very good tasting nut. I used to gather them in the Black Hills. They're very similar to the commercial variety. The nuts are enclosed in a tubular husk, and it resembles a beak. That's why they call them beaked hazelnuts. They're a little prickly. You might want to wear gloves when you're breaking them apart. They generally ripen sometime in the fall. The young tops of cosmos are edible raw or cooked. Some say they taste like mangoes. The plants are better before they start to flower. Different species don't all taste quite the same. Most of the ones I have pictured aren't as good as the ones that grow in the east. Hawthorns sort of remind me of little apples. They're not quite as good, but they're very similar. They are both members of the rose family. They often have thorny branches. It has sustained people when they weren't able to find anything else. You can also eat the leaves if they're young. The berries are also especially high in vitamin C. Calabazia or coyote melons are very common in Southern California. They're kind of an unpleasant smelling plant. The fruit doesn't really smell that good either. The seeds are edible though. The mature fruits and taproots are reported to be poisonous. The taproots get enormous. Winged pigweed or tumbleweeds are a well-known icon of the Old West. They were made popular in songs like this one from Festus from Gunsmoke.
Lonely but free I'll be found, drifting along with a tumbling tumbleweed.
The seeds were a staple of many native tribes. Gamote is a relative of parsley and carrots. The root and leaves are edible. You have to be a little careful because it resembles water hemlock. The plants are also endangered in some places in the desert. The roots are reported to have a pleasant taste. The leaves are sometimes eaten like parsley. The young roots are better eating. The leaves have a strong and pleasant odor and can be used as a pot herb. Nutsedges look like grass. You can tell them apart because nutsedges have triangular stems. They were one of the earliest plants to be cultivated. They were grown in ancient Egypt. They are notable because they have very high fat contents, up to 36%. They are listed as one of the most invasive of weeds. They are very hard to get rid of because the little tubers keep wanting to grow. Some of them are reported to have a Brazil nut-like flavor. Others are more bitter. They were grown as a food crop by the Paiute in Owens Valley, California. Crowfoot grass originated in Africa, where it's still grown as a traditional food. It's mostly considered a famine food. The grains are very small, but they're relatively easy to collect and grind. It is generally considered to be a weed in the United States. It grows mostly in damp areas in heavy soil. It looks a lot like other grasses. The most characteristic feature is probably the helicopter-like seed heads. Blue dicks sort of resemble onions. They tend to grow around places that have burned recently. Yeah, I found a whole bunch of them around here where it had burned a couple years ago. The corms can be dried and ground into a powder, then used in soups or mixed with cereal flours. It's usually harvested in the spring. You can also eat the flowers if you want to. The plants usually have smaller little tubers or cormlets. If you leave them, a new plant will grow from it. Western tansy mustard is the American version. There's also another variety that grows in Europe. It has small edible leaves, spicy seeds, and pods. It prefers dry areas. It has 4-petaled flowers resembling a cross. Tansy mustards were a major food plant for many Native Americans. They were primarily used for their seeds. The seeds are very small, but they're easy to collect and separate. It can be toxic to livestock because of selenium. The seeds are quite high in protein and fat. Crabgrass is a very widespread and persistent weed. The seeds are edible. It makes a fine white flour that can be used for semolina. Crabgrass is considered a staple grain in parts of Africa. It can produce up to 17 tons per acre. In Africa it's called fonio. The common species in America is called hairy crabgrass. Disporum hookeri, or Hooker's fairy bells, are a beautiful little flower. The berries are rather unremarkable. They are reported to not taste very good. Many Native Americans thought they were poisonous. They were probably confusing it with baneberries or doll's eyes. Very deadly poisonous. These berries are just not very good. Shooting stars are a very widespread and common plant. They're reported to be poisonous raw. They're so common it's good to know as a potential survival food. They're pretty little flowers and there's not a whole lot of food, so it's probably not something you'd want to eat unless you were desperate. Barrel cactus are common in the deserts of the southwest United States. The flesh of the plant is edible. Some people eat the flowers. They always grow on top of the plant. The pulp of barrel cactus has widely been used to making candy. It's sometimes called candy barrel. In an emergency, the pulp can be chewed for its food and water content. They were often used as a cooking vessel. They would place hot rocks in with the food. Barnyard grass, considered a weed in the United States, is another plant that's used as food in other parts of the world. It can be cooked whole or ground into a flour. The seeds are small, but they're easy to harvest. They are reported to be somewhat bitter. It is usually only used in times of famine. In some places it is grown as food, like Chad and India and the Sudan. Young parts of Eucalypta above the ground are edible. The plant contains nicotine. It would probably be better not to eat too much of it. It is mainly used as a pot herb. Goosegrass is a grass that grows in warm places. The seeds are the main edible part. You can also eat the young leaves and the roots. Stems are sometimes used in weaving. The seeds are mainly used as a famine food. They can be cooked whole or ground into flour. The roots are somewhat diuretic and they're used as a laxative. It is also called finger millet, and it is one of the main foods in many places like dry areas in India. It's very nutritious, but it has rather low yields. Crowberries grow up into the Arctic. They are a low-growing evergreen shrub. They're an important source of vitamin C for people that live up in the far north. The berries are reported to not taste very good. They're slightly acrid and they don't have much taste. The berries are also used as a purple dye. That's the end of part 3.